Women of Jazz. Nice. I like that shirt.
Thank you.
How wonderful it is in some of our scenes we have together that it's so stimulating. And by the way, I bought a nice sized bottle of wine. So I'm hoping whoever can stay after the show, that we can stay and have a cup or two of wine together and really share our hearts and you know, our joy of doing this particular wonderful show. Wonderful written show, Melvin, and wonderfully directed, Bill, and you know, wonderfully performed by this talented cast. So hopefully after the show we can all kind of hang for a moment or two after your wonderful fans have given you pats on the back.
What did we do yesterday? Now we're so grateful for the opportunity to perform, to do what we love, to do our art, the reason why we left our families, what we sacrificed. We did so many crazy things to be here, Lord. Thank you, Lord, that they're great stars and great talented people that are going to change this world in this room, in this moment. So Lord, we leave it to you right now. Help us. And we also ask the spirits of all those that were playing to even aid us in the work that we're doing tonight. And we pray all this. Amen.
All right, let's get to it.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2,
It falls to our lot to tear off the shackles that bind Mother Africa. Let Africa be our guiding star, a star of destiny. No one knows the hour of Africa's redemption, but it is coming, and it's in the wind. And one day, like a storm, it will be here. And when that day comes, all of Africa will stand together, and all of Africa will be free. Africa for the African, home and abroad. We must control the economy of our own community. We cannot let others control the jobs, the housing, the businesses, and the schools in our communities. We must pool our resources, control and use our resources to create our own jobs and help our own before we can help others. How are you going to be involved in politics without controlling the economy of your own community? These so-called Negro leaders of our people, they seem so willing to turn back the hand of progress at the whim of their white support. We must not mistake lip service and noise for bravery. Any leadership that will cringe or hide and bow when the cloud seems dark are those that we must avoid in choosing as leaders. True leadership looks at dreadful odds and smiles at them for the cause that need assistance. Lift ye the heights of liberty and cease not until you have planted the banner of the red and the black and the green upon Africa's hilltop.
Amy Ashwood became a really important figure, especially in London. And there are plaques there for her and so on. Yes.
Well, there's a lot of questions. Why didn't he ever go to Africa? He never made it to the motherland. He sent a delegation to Liberia. He could have went, but he went all around the world, literally. South America, Canada, Europe, just never made it to Africa. So I would ask him why.
The reason Marcus Garvey never put his foot on the African soil is because it was under the control of the colonial powers, and they wouldn't allow him to come there. You remember what happened a few years later? You know, they were in between because the Italians took that over.
And went to war,
They don't.
right?
Yeah, so the total of Africa, all of the African resources was under the control of the colonial powers. England, France, Britain, the United States. A major source was the huge 6-volume set called the Marcus Garvey Papers that was put together by some professors centered in North Carolina. And it's maybe about 1,200 pages each. And after the Freedom of Information Act came out, they were able to get all of the documents, and they put a 6-volume set together. You know, my only regret when I was putting this together is I think I left out one of the most important individuals who was a mentor for young J.A. Rogers, A. Philip Randolph, and Marcus Garvey. And his name was Herbert Harris. And he was the editor of the Negro World. That's what made that such a great newspaper, and he was a brilliant individual. You know.
Herbert Harrison?
Herbert Harrison was his name. Mm-hmm.
With Hoover, as you can see, there was such a bitterment with each other. I mean, they totally didn't like each other. And the way Michael played Hoover, I mean, he played him every line. I could see he didn't like this guy, Amos.
I know you worked for President Roosevelt, but you know nothing about the national security. You were only a bodyguard.
You're what, 28 to 29? What do you know about national security? I've been out there around the block a few times. You have to be very careful about what you're asking us to do. Do you have the authority from the Attorney General?
The Attorney General gave me this job, and Congress is looking over his shoulder. I intend to save America from racial turmoil.
I hope your creative process.
Be careful, Agent Amos. This is part of my plan for getting Marcus Garvey.
It's also your plan to start the Palmer raids on November 7th, 1919, the second year anniversary of the Communist Revolution.
They bombed the house of the Attorney General, our top law official. They set off bombs in just about every major city in America. The Attorney General believes, like I do, that the communists were plotting to overthrow the American government and set up a Soviet model.
Marcus Garvey never bombed Palmer's house. Garvey's not trying to overthrow the government. He is proposing leaving the government, move his people to Africa.
Marcus Garvey is just like the radicals and communists. Troublemakers. We know how to deal with troublemakers. That is why we had to strike. Going off your question earlier about kind of what attracted me to the role is the idea of this is, depending on where you go in the play, anywhere from 20 to 30 years before even the armed forces was assimilated and allowed to mix together as far as the races. So one of the major themes is just how all these characters, especially between Garvey and Hoover, is they have their morals and what they hold to be true and okay, but the lengths they're willing to go to against those morals to achieve their goals. Will the ends justify, or will the means justify the ends? And for Hoover, who one of his chief mentors growing up and kind of really coming into his professional life was a pretty high up member of the KKK. So he had a lot of influence there. So the idea that you had that base level of hatred of thinking that someone is beneath you, and then being forced to reconcile, I need this person, he's capable, I can't get things done without him, and realizing it's not just one guy, but that you really can't do anything unless you also get all these other people of color that you hate behind you too. So being forced to come to terms with that, and in his own way, like I was saying, 20, 30 years before even the military service, trying to integrate things while still hating it was a really kind of attractive and human thing for me.
Well, my name is TJ Ba. I'm originally from West Africa. I was born in Sierra Leone. I grew up in Liberia. And I came to the state, went to St. Louis, Missouri, went to college in Missouri. Then moved to LA, to pursue my passion, which is acting. And on this show, Catch the Tiger, I play Reverend Eason. Reverend Eason was one of the biggest, pastors, the biggest congregation in New York, in Harlem, who introduced Marcus Garvey, for the first time. Yeah, the connection is that the African Americans, they was looking for a place to go back to, and Liberia was the place, they decided to take them back, to take back the free slaves, and they took them to Liberia, and that's what Marcus Garvey was trying to, to do, to take them back to Liberia. And the reason why he wanted to go to Liberia, because Liberia had, what they call, rubber plantation, rubber. It's like one of the, pretty much the largest producer of rubber, almost, in the entire world. So what Marcus was trying to do is to take, blacks from here, take them to Liberia so they can build the rubber plantation, so it can be owned by Liberians. Because
there was already American blacks there.
There was already American, because after emancipation, after slavery here, few black Americans was taken, because they wanted, the people that wanted to go back to, to Africa was taken to Liberia. So they went to Liberia, and we call them in Liberia the Congo Liberians. They call them Congo Liberians because they came from America, went to Liberia. And that's why when you look at Liberia have the same education government system just like America. So it's like a mini America. But they went down there and did the same thing that was done to them here by what white people did to them here. They went there and did the same thing to the indigenous Liberian, like, being superior, So they created the government, every wealth, business, everything, they own everything, and suppress their own people, their own people that look like them. But, because, hey, they feel like they came from America, so they were better than the indigenous Liberia, And the the class system. That happens until, almost in the 70s to the 80s before things changed, when the typical indigenous Liberia took over.
So the point I was trying to get is that Garvey going to Liberia wasn't something new.
No.
It was something that American blacks had been doing for a while since slavery.
Since the end of slavery, yeah.
He wasn't the only one that would say, hey, blacks go to Liberia. This was two ports there in Sierra Leone that this was already happening, and many blacks nowadays just don't know that.
No, they don't know, yeah. There were some people who wanted to go back to Africa, and looking at that time, Africa was still under colonization. And because Africa was still under colonization, the only places that was not colonized back then was Liberia and Ethiopia. So Liberia was a free, independent state, So, according to Liberian history, they had their independence in 1847 because they were never colonized, So that was like an ideal place, If you came out from slavery, you want to go back to Africa, it's like you want to go somewhere where you feel like it's free.
My name is Bamba John Bamba. I'm an actor originally from Ivory Coast, West Africa, and I play Marcus Garvey. What I liked or what I love about Marcus Garvey was his power and charisma to move people to action and unite people. He was able to get 6 million black folks together in the 1920s.
How many million?
6 million!
I didn't know we had that.
6 million in America. Farrakhan was only able to get 1, and that was 1920. I think he was very patient. I mean, the thing about him is he put the movement before himself. And his first wife he met when he was still young in Jamaica, and they started it really together. But when he came to America and they almost tried to shoot him, she decided that she couldn't continue on, and he was ready to die for it, and she wasn't quite. So he decided to just keep going with whomever will roll with him, and I think that's how he found Amy, his second one. But I still feel like he has a place in his heart for Amy Ashwood, who he calls his Josephine. a lot of what he says kind of comes from my own heart, because I've always had this this deep motivation to help Africa. I'm from Africa originally, so unite black people. It breaks my heart every time I see us begging. When I see someone in America begging, when I see someone in Africa, when I see the fact that we can't unite, and that's the one thing that just keeps us where we are. If we were able to unite, the power of Africa would be so amazing.
Ethiopia shall stretch forth her hand unto God. Africa for the African, home and abroad. One God, one aim, one destiny. Rise up, you mighty race. You can accomplish what you will. Where's the black man's government? Where is his king, his kingdom, his president, his army, his navy? Well, I could not find them anywhere. So I declare that I will help to make them. Lift yourselves up from the mires and rise up. Rise as high as the stars themselves. Don't let nobody stop you. Don't let nobody look down on you because of the color of your skin. You descend from Africa, and Africa has a glorious history. We say to the white man who now exploits Africa that it is in his best interest to clear out of Africa now.
Yes.
Clear out! Because we don't know where. And we shall not ask the white man, why are you here? We shall say, get out of here! If Europe is for the Europeans, then I say Africa for the African! I recently took a 38-state tour to study the conditions of black people in America. Let me tell you what I found. These so-called Negro leaders of our people, they have no plan. They're just making a living off their so-called leadership while our people continue to grope in the dark looking for a little light. Why are these so-called leaders so dependent on the support and the goodwill of the white man? Any leadership that teaches you to depend upon another race is a leadership that will enslave you.
Yes.
I said any leadership that teaches you to depend upon another race is a leadership that will enslave you.
That's
This is Petal Davril, and Petal plays Amy Jakes Garvey. And of course, I'm Bill White, the director of the piece.
Now, I've seen her many different times.
Oh my God, I loved researching Amy Jakes Garvey. It was a privilege. This woman stood for so many things that I think it's so appropriate for every African American woman to know and understand. Read her book, The Veiled Life of Amy Jakes Garvey.
And when you get out of the book and jump,
I got out of it that we can and we do and we will continue to do everything. So support and continue to support each other. Amy Jakes stood for so many things, and I think her concept and understanding the role of a woman in the times, early 1920s we're talking, is still applicable today, because the unison in family and in our culture is what she stood for. And from that, even with her own personal incentives in supporting the UNIA, she had so many amazing things that she stood for. And I felt like she was really ahead of her time. So it was an honor to play her, and I'm still not done learning more about this woman.
I am surprised at you. You know my history. Well, I had to run my father's business when he was sick, and I ran it very well. You appointed John to the position of manager of the Manufacturers Association, and John has no background and a third-grade education. I can take the pressure. You're the one that's not focusing.
So now that we've come to the closing night for now, let's just say, but this is it, closing night. How does that make both of you feel from your perspective?
Sad.
Yeah,
it's always bittersweet because, you know, it's like we become a
and I saw
family.
your mama.
I know, my mom came tonight, which made me so excited. My everything. And it's sad because it's like we become this family, you know, you really do. And we rely on each other, we need each other, and I think that that's the most saddening part, is to say goodbye. But we love what we do, so it's on to the next journey.
We realize that these actors are just, P.E.T.L.P.R.O and all the actors are just wonderful. They're skilled in their craft, and they take direction well, and give the character a really wonderful sense of self.
Do you think that without the interference of J. Edgar Hoover, that Marcus Garvey may have succeeded?
Yes, absolutely, I do.
Yes.
Do you think that Malcolm X may have succeeded?
Yes.
Yeah, we would
Do you
have
think that Martin Luther King may have succeeded
Yes.
without the interference in the murder of J. Edgar Hoover?
Yeah.
Are
Yes.
you both aware that J. Edgar Hoover has been proven to be a black man now?
Yes.
Yes.
It's just too deep. I'm glad you didn't interject that. That would
No.
Woo! They ain't ready for it.
Well, there are one or two people who were here tonight at the performance who have expressed an interest in looking further.
We're talking checks.
Well, we don't know yet, but we're certainly going to
You
try.
might need a manager.
We're certainly gonna- but we really want to put it in a larger space. This is a play with a lot of different locations, and it would be really good if when a scene is happening, it's just that location and no sets from the other scene.
Oh, that's how I shot. What you call this play?
Yes, yes. Sabado one, yeah.
So we want to